They laughed together when the world wasn't watching. They comforted each other when life became unbearable. But behind the smiles, there was a silence that had heartbreak, pride, and regret. For years, Elton John kept the truth to himself about the bond he shared with Princess Diana and the pain that nearly broke them apart. Now he's finally ready to tell the story that changed both of their lives forever. The night they met IT was the summer of 1981, a year that would forever change British history. Prince Charles was preparing to marry Ion nursery school assistant named Diana Spencer, and all of Britain was swept up in the fairy tale. But for Elton John, who was already one of the most famous musicians in the world, that year marked something far more personal, the beginning of a friendship that would change his life. By then, Elton had already become a familiar figure among the royals. The Queen Mother loved his music, and Princess Margaret, known for her rebellious streak, often invited him to intimate gatherings at Kensington Palace. He performed for aristocrats, dined with dukes, and even shared jokes with Prince Philip, who once teased him for driving a bright yellow Aston Martin around Windsor. Still, despite all the glamour, Elton had never truly felt at home in those circles. That changed one unforgettable night at Prince Andrew's 21st birthday party held inside Windsor Castle. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, jewels, and royal formality. Elton, dressed modestly by his standards, sat at the piano, playing softly as guests mingled. He later described feeling nervous, out of place among so many lords and ladies. Then, as he turned to look across the room, he saw her. Diana Spencer had just entered, young, radiant, and not yet a princess. The air shifted. She had an incredible social ease, Elton later wrote in his autobiography, an ability to make anyone feel completely comfortable in her company. When their eyes met, Hes smiled politely, and she returned it with warmth. Within minutes, the two were talking like old friends. They laughed about the awkward music playing and ended up miming the Charleston together in the middle of the ballroom, at a moment so spontaneous and absurd that even the Queen noticed and smiled. Elton would later say, "That night, I felt as if I'd known her forever." For Diana, that charm and humor were a lifeline. She was weeks away from marrying into a family that represented duty, structure, and silence. Her every move would soon be dissected by the press. For Elton, she was refreshingly real, unpretentious, quick-witted, and full of empathy. She was fabulous company, he remembered. The best dinner guest, incredibly indiscreet and a real gossip, but she cared deeply about people. From that night on, their bond deepened, both outsiders in their own worlds. He, a flamboyant musician constantly under scrutiny for his sexuality. She, a woman about to lose her freedom to the royal institution. They saw each other's pain without judgment. That mutual understanding, born out of laughter on a dance floor, would turn into one of the most enduring friendships of the 20th century. Neither of them could have known that it would also end in unimaginable tragedy, and that one day Elton's voice would be the one to say goodbye for them both. A friendship tested by fame. Throughout the 1980s and early 1990s, Elton John and Princess Diana became inseparable in a way that very few people around them understood. Their lives were lived under constant flashbulbs. Yet behind the headlines was a friendship built on honesty and vulnerability. Whenever they appeared together, whether at charity galas, royal events, or music concerts, the cameras captured smiles and laughter. But what the public didn't see was the private compassion that held their bond together. Elton often said that Diana had a gift. She could make the most powerful people in the world feel at ease. Yet she herself rarely felt at peace. She was trapped between expectation, emotion, royalty, and humanity as the 1980s progressed. Her marriage to Prince Charles grew colder. Rumors off affairs distanced, and despair filled the newspapers. Inside Kensington Palace, Diana was suffocating under the weight of royal formality. Elton understood that loneliness all too well. Behind his extravagant costumes and fame, he was fighting his own battles with addiction, self-doubt, and the burden of being constantly scrutinized. They recognized that pain in each other, and it forged an unspoken trust. Their friendship blossomed during these difficult years. Diana often attended Elton's charity events, especially those supporting AIDS awareness, a cause close to both their hearts. At a time when the stigma surrounding AIDS was at its peak, Diana defied royal protocol by visiting patients, shaking their hands, and embracing them without gloves. Elton once said that this single act changed the public perception of AIDS forever. IT was the moment he realized just how fearless she truly was. She didn't care about image or gossip. She cared about people. There were lighter times, too. Diana had a mischievous sense of humor that matched Elton's perfectly. She loved teasing him about his flamboyant wardrobe, while he admired her ability to turn royal stiffness into charm. Elton recalled parties where she'd laugh uncontrollably at his jokes or roll her eyes at the snobbery of the aristocracy. But wherever they went, chaos followed. Point one evening at a private dinner party in London. Both Richard Gere and Sylvester Stallone were guests, and both became infatuated with Diana. The situation quickly escalated into what Elton called a near fist fight over her attention. She could bring Hollywood superstars to the verge of a punch-up, he later wrote. They were utterly bewitched. Yet, even as she drew crowds and admiration everywhere she went, Diana's private life remained heartbreaking. She struggled with bulimia, sleepless nights, and a feeling of being unloved. Elton would sometimes visit her simply to listen. No cameras, no audience, just two friends escaping the noise. But as fame grew, so did pressure. Diana's world became harder to navigate, filled with manipulation and palace politics. Elton worried about her constantly, knowing how fragile trust could be in that environment. By the early 1990s, they were like siblings joking, arguing, and relying on one another. But with great affection came occasional conflict. Fame, pride, and exhaustion began to chip away at even their closest bond. And soon, a misunderstanding would bring the friendship to its lowest point, one that neither of them would forget. The rift be why the mid-1990s. Elton John and Princess Diana's friendship had become one of the most talked-about bonds between a celebrity and a royal. They had weathered media storms together, laughed through scandals, and supported each other in ways the public never saw. But in 1996, something unexpected happened, something that would tear their friendship apart, leaving both wounded and silent. It started with a charity project that meant the world to Elton. He had been working on a coffee table book of rock photography, a glamorous collection of images of musicians, performers, and artists, with all proceeds going to an AIDS foundation. Diana had agreed to write the foreword. It wasn't just a favor. It was a statement. She had long been an advocate for AIDS awareness, breaking taboos, and humanizing a disease many still feared. For Elton, having her name on the project was bought-on honor and a powerful symbol of compassion. Then, without warning, she withdrew. A letter arrived from Diana's office, polite but distant. She explained that she could no longer participate. The reason, as Elton later learned, was royal disapproval. Advisors from Buckingham Palace had objected to her involvement in a book that included photos of semi-nude male models. They didn't like the idea of a member of the royal family being associated with that kind of imagery, Elton recalled. To him, it felt like a betrayal, not from a princess, but from a friend he thought he could count on. On Larry King Live years later, Elton admitted, "I was too happy, and I let her know that." Hasn't her a message expressing his disappointment. Diana, feeling cornered, responded with what he described as adder letter. It was sharp, cold, and final. After that, there was silence. For months, they didn't speak. Elton said he felt deeply hurt, not because of her decision, but because of the distance that followed. Diana, meanwhile, was under enormous pressure. Her divorce from Prince Charles had just been finalized in August 1996. She had lost her royal title, Her Royal Highness, and with a piece of her identity. The press sounded her day and night, and the palace offered no comfort. Surrounded by people with conflicting agendas, she began to question who she could truly trust. Elton believed that palace advisors might have influenced her withdrawal, but privately, he also wondered whether she had grown tired of being connected to other people's causes. Whatever the reason, the damage was done. Two people who once shared everything, laughter, grief, even secrets about the monarchy, were suddenly strangers. It was awful, Elton later said. We'd always been honest with each other, but pride got in the way. He admitted he could have called her, but didn't. We were both too proud, he confessed. And before we could fix it, it was too late. For almost a year, the silence between them grew heavier. Behind closed doors, Elton continued his charity work, and Diana tried to rebuild her life as an independent humanitarian. Yet both carried the quiet ache of a friendship left unresolved. Neither could have known that time was running out and that fate was about to bring them face to face again under the shadow of another tragedy. The call after Versace on July 15, 1997, Italian designer Gianni Versace, one of Diana and Elton's closest mutual friends, was shot and killed outside his Miami Beach mansion. The news sent shockwaves across the fashion and entertainment world. Both Elton and Diana were devastated. She had modeled one of Versace's gowns for Harper's Bazaar in 1991 and adored him as affluent and confidant. After his murder, Diana reportedly asked her bodyguard, "Do you think they'll do that to me?" It was a chilling foreshadowing of what was to come. At Versace's funeral in Milan, Diana spotted Elton sitting in grief. The two hadn't spoken in months, but she walked over and reached for his hand. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "It wasn't our falling out. Let's be friends again." Elton later revealed that the moment touched him deeply, viewed in true Diana fashion. She broke the tension with humor. The words of comfort coming from her lips at that exact moment, he recalled, were actually, "God, I'd love a polo." They laughed, and in that moment, their friendship was reborn. They made plans to see each other again soon. But just 6 weeks later, that meeting would never happen. The night the world stopped in the early hours of August 31st, 1997, Elton John was woken by the sound of his fax machine. A message had come through. So sorry to hear about this awful news. Confused, he turned on the television and the world fell silent. Princess Diana had been killed in a car crash in Paris, chased by paparazzi through the Pont de l'Alma tunnel. She was 36 years old. Elton was devastated. "It felt unreal," he said later. "Just weeks earlier, we'd been laughing together at Gianni's funeral, and now she was gone." He was asked by the Spencer family to perform at her funeral, and with Bernie Taupin. He reworked the lyrics of his 1973 song Candle in the Wind, originally written for Marilyn Monroe. The new version began, "Goodbye England's Rose. May you ever grow in our hearts." On September 6, 1997, Elton stood in Westminster Abbey before millions watching around the world. His hands trembled as he began to sing. The song wasn't a performance. It was a farewell. There was a sense that for 4 minutes the world was watching me, he later said. But it wasn't about me. It was about her. The single version of Candle in the Wind, 1997, became the best-selling record in history, with over 33 million copies sold. Yet Elton said he never felt proud of it. Why would anyone want to listen to it? He confessed, "It felt morbid. It wasn't something I could ever celebrate."